It's Wednesday, so let's chat. I'm Kanan Chandran, the publisher of stormasia.com, and this is our regular series of discussions on topical issues, the Wednesday web chat, or the WED web chat. This session brings together people who are experts in their field or with a lot of experience in their field who are willing to share their knowledge with us based on the topic that we have decided for the week, as well as from your questions that you may pose on the Q&A, as well as the chat for our platforms on this webinar. So I think what's happening today with the COVID and with everything else that's going on, the world's going through a lot of change. But still, people want to own their dream home, don't they? They still want to have a roof over their heads. And though the majority of the population in Singapore live in public housing, that hasn't stopped them becoming millionaires, which is a bit strange for 99-year lease properties. You have roughly about 70 people selling their properties for about $1 million each year. So that's quite amazing. But last year was a strange kind of a year with COVID, and the spillover effects are being felt now as well, and will probably continue to do so for a while. So while it's worked in strange ways in the industry, it could have repercussions down the line. So property affects, I think it affects all segments of society. What will the younger generation afford? What will the existing owners do about ongoing payments if they've lost a job, for instance? And what should retirees do with their property? So today we have amongst our panelists three people with different experiences, which I think will make for a very nice combination of insights. We've got Jennifer Chia, who's a partner of TSMP Law Corporation. She's a veteran in corporate transactional work and specializing in banking and finance and corporate real estate. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hello, hi everyone.
We've also got Swee Yong, the CEO of International Property Advisor. He's a lecturer and author of 5 books on the property market, with a 6th, which is behind him. The Future of Real Estate, What's Next After New Tech and COVID-19. That's coming out shortly. Welcome, Swee Yong.
Thank you, Kanan.
And we've got Vina Ip, author and blogger of, and her blog site is Property Soul Blog. Her books offer practical advice for home buyers based on her experience of building up a property portfolio. Welcome, Vina. Welcome, everybody, to this session. And I think I would like to ask all of you, how has COVID and the job uncertainty and the whole market been affected for you guys? I mean, how has it affected buyers and sellers and their sentiment towards the property market? Has it changed much? Maybe we'll start with Jennifer, since you would have seen some fair few transactions.
Sure. Thanks, Kanan. So with COVID last year, it hit about a year ago, a lot of things went down in the sense that people couldn't view premises, and to some people that was very, very important. So with viewings down, nobody was really buying and selling during April and May last year. And even when the economy opened up in June and July, people were still very tentative because they were not sure how the economy would pan out and whether the crisis would get worse. So from a legal transactions viewpoint, we only saw a pickup in the real estate market, the residential one also, towards the last quarter of 2020. That was about October, November, December. And it's still continuing up to today. In fact, I would say it got stronger in 2021, with both buyers and sellers both in the market. In fact, just the last week, I've had a whole spectrum of the residential market asking me to act for them, both for those who own apartments, those who own condominiums, and we've even got some movements in the GCB area.
Okay, cool. So it's looking promising this year, right? But not at levels that it was pre-COVID, or?
I think it's actually quite close to what it was pre-COVID, because you must remember last year that demand was stifled because a lot of people who had ready cash were not willing to enter the market because of the uncertainty. I think this quarter, especially in 2021, Singapore has been able to control the virus within Singapore itself. We've been able to also do our tracing properly so that we can close community clusters as soon as possible. The vaccine is in. I mean, the mutations are another thing, but people are more upbeat now with the vaccines. Also, the low interest rate environment is still prevalent, and people are using that now to buy and sell.
Okay, cool. Vina, how about yourself? What have you seen?
Thanks. I think it is naive to believe that the COVID-19 has little impact on the Singapore property market. So I think any rebound in the second half of last year is a very false impression. It's caused mainly by clearing of the transactions after lockdown. And there are many people who have been waiting to buy and sell their homes. So they now all come up to buy. And home buyers, some of them, they're desperate to move house because of the inconveniences of the working from home. And our government has done a very good job to spend billions on job support scheme and different relief measures to save jobs and a lot of SMEs and industries. That's why the bankruptcies and the bank repossessions are also saved, mainly by the bank's loan repayment deferrals. The MAS said by last August, banks have approved about 36,000 applications to defer payment of property loans until the end of last year. So the deferred payment is actually around $29 billion. Today, Straits Times, there's an article saying that for commercial and industrial properties, government has given out 900 million rental reliefs and another 1.8 billion of dollars in property tax rebates. So it's something like a scenario that you have a teacher that think that the whole class is not ready for exams yet. So you defer the exam for 6 months, and then you go out and tell the school and the principal that, hey, you know, my class is doing very well. Nobody failed in exams. But you can defer another 6 months, but at the end of the day, you still need them to go for exams, you know, and that's when the result is will be seen. So I think the teacher is correct to say that there's nobody failed in exam because basically nobody failed, right? But they also defer it, you know, that it's not the reality at all. And the property market is undergoing what I see in the face of a dead cat bounce. So in 2021, we would, and a few years that follow, we will see the actual picture coming out. So we'll see the problems like oversupply in the markets that will slowly show its symptoms, because this problem has been there even before COVID-19.
Okay, so when it's time for exam, how do you think they'll fare?
It depends on how ready are the students. If you haven't studied and you're not up to par and you've been lazy all the while, you are going to fail, right? So there will be people who are fully prepared and people who are not prepared. It depends, but you cannot have everybody not fail if there's no exam at all, right?
So it's going to be similar to what it was before, because I think people's mentality won't change, right? Quite likely. Swee Yong, you've got a book coming out on this whole subject. What are your findings? What are your thoughts?
For me, last year, of course, my business volume went down because I've been focusing on recommending my investors to take advantage of the growing Japanese residential as well as but because of the restrictions in travel, then I have got to slow down that part of my work. I am still very optimistic that when the world goes into recovery, the Japanese real estate market will lead the way, because in terms of for their hotel price per key, in terms of their high-end luxury products, the dollar per square foot, Tokyo is still very attractive. Osaka too. So once the travel restrictions are lifted, you know where to find me in the 125 million population in Japan. For Singapore market, I have been cooking this book since my last book was published in 2017. I have been dragging my feet a little bit, but I've added a lot to the research and the data, and I'm most concerned about what is the demographics trend in Singapore for the next 10 years. The bulk of baby boomers, each year from 2021 until 2060, in fact, for the next 40 years, each each year we will have more than 50,000 Singaporeans celebrating 65th birthday. 55 years old and 65 years old milestones are important for Singaporeans because we plan our CPF and retirement funds around these two age milestones. And looking at how the death rates, birth rates are going, the shrinking population pyramid. One more data point for all of you who like data. From our forecast, around the year 2030, the number of deaths would exceed the number of births in Singapore. So at about 30,000 per year. So with this type of irreversible, aging is irreversible, no matter what SK2 says, right? With this type of irreversible trends, I think we would be hard-pressed to squeeze additional yield from properties unless our economy can really have a very bold moves and Singapore starts leading the way in, for example, technology.
Okay, so looking at what's been happening in this past year, do you see that there will be more people trying to get into the market now because they see opportunities out there? Do you think, I know there's been assistance provided to help people defer payments and all that kind of stuff, but you can defer payment at some point, it'll stop, but you may not have a job still. So what then? Do you see more properties coming to the market? Is it going to be a lot of distressed sales taking place?
The distressed sales, we will have to probably wait for another 1 to 2 months because the borrowers who are unable to work out their loan packages with the banks would probably now undergo the process of maybe not going bankrupt, but the property being seized for foreclosure sales. This is a strange market. At the very top end, we have got high net worths who may be stuck in Singapore. We have got new schemes by EDB, MAS for the very wealthy people, the ultra high net worths to come to Singapore. We are trying to persuade them to set up their family offices here to manage their money. So at the very top end, yes, the interest from these rich families. At the very bottom end, we also have people stuck in Singapore. For example, the Malaysian workers, say advertising executives, say IT, software, service support people who are stuck here. So they are, instead of going back every day, they are now renting a place. And so that's pushed up demand, not just of rentals, but in fact, then it has pushed up the valuation of the HDB flats. On another hand, you just looking at a very big number of Sentosa Cove, most of the transactions in the last 2 to 3 years continue to be transactions where sellers are willing to take major losses on selling the Sentosa Cove. On the mainland, we've got a couple of examples as well. Wouldn't name them. And so this market is, while we are saying that the market is hot, on another hand, there are people who are trying to exit with losses. But transaction-wise, certainly, I think over the next 2 to 3 months, we should be seeing some transactions from people who are eager to get out. And we are also seeing people who have held back and have accumulated more bonuses and cash now and ready to get into the market because the whole year last year sidelines.
So if, like the Sentosa Cove examples that you just cited, if they have the money, why are they selling it at a loss? Why do you think that is so?
For the ultra rich, if you are worth 300 to 500 mil, losing 2 million to walk away and then reinvesting that money into Tesla shares might make you back the 2 million loss that you have taken in Sentosa Cove.
Are you saying then that they view the Singapore market as something maybe to hold back on and maybe revisit down the line? There are better things out there?
That's possible because for a foreigner who sold his investment here, getting back into residential investment would be another 20% of stamp duties, which meaning that if they were to sell now, it means that they are unlikely to get back in until our stamp duty regime is changed.
Jennifer, are you seeing much of this taking place with the transactions that you're handling?
Yes, actually, Swee Yong, that's very interesting. You spoke about Sentosa Cove. In fact, quite a number of the transactions that I handled last year was Sentosa Cove, and a lot of it is very attractive to people from the PRC. They especially see Sentosa Cove with different eyes from the current sellers. I think when Sentosa Cove came out about 10 years ago, it was very attractive. It sounded like a waterfront living, etc., etc. It's kind of lost that shine. And some of these people, Sentosa Cove was anyway, for the very high net worth individuals, Sentosa Cove was their second home. They all have a first home on Singapore Island, a GCB likely around the Botanic Gardens. And now with the economy as it is a bit unstable, Sentosa Cove being the investment property, like Swee Yong says, they're happy and willing to let it go just at a loss of 2 million, but at least they have cash in hand to reinvest into something that may be more attractive. And then of course you have the Chinese buyers coming in. And once you attract one person in, it's something like a community there. And then they'll call their friends. And that's why I think Sentosa Cove in the last year especially has been very attractive to PRC nationals. Now that said also, it's very interesting, Kanan, you spoke about distress sales. And I must tell you in the last 6 months, I've not actually handled many distress sales, which you would normally have dealt with in the Asian financial crisis of 1997, 1998, in 2008 after the Lehman crisis. Because in those cases, the government didn't prop up the economy at all and let free economic forces flow. So as you know, there are rental rebates, there are loan deferments. Importantly, the GSS scheme is still in place and people still have jobs. And I think companies are also not ready to retrench because they're taking the GSS support. Now, that ends on the 31st of March, unless, of course, it is extended. But I think there's only so much the government can prop up the economy because we've dipped a lot into our reserves already. So like Swee Yong says, wait 1 or 2 more months and then let the economy be free flow and let the economy correct itself properly. And I think that's where you'll then see again distress sales coming back.
So it's sort of like an akan datang situation. It's going to come for sure.
That's what we feel. I mean, that's what we real estate practitioners feel because there's still money propping up the real estate market in Singapore. And we're just waiting for when there's no more money coming in.
Okay. Vina, you've dabbled in the market, you've built a portfolio. Would you consider this a good time to get into the space?
If I were a property agent, I would tell you anytime is a good time to buy. But if you are somebody like me who is a property investor, that I have to pay additional buyer stamp duties and I'm bound by seller stamp duty now. And when I buy a property in the market, I can't even get a decent or positive net return, yet I cannot find any tenant or is passed to get a very low rental. Why am I buying? And another thing is that even if I buy now and if prices plunge in the near future and the government finally relax the buying restrictions, I don't get to enjoy it. So I would have a very high opportunity cost. I tend to agree with Swee Yong that the rental market is good in the HDB market right now. It's either a whole flat rent out or even renting out rooms or on a short-term lease, month by month cases. But for the condo owners that I know, they are having a very bad time because of the number of foreigners that are leaving, and especially for the high-end market. So I've been researching on the high-end market right now, on the condo market, and I see that kind of rental that owners are asking, I really want to move in because this really have never been so affordable before. So the owners are asking for dirt cheap prices to rent out their high-end properties right now, yet it has been listed in the property portals for very long and there's no taker at all. So you can imagine kind of thing the landlords of those luxury properties what they're suffering now, because the vacancy rates for private residential properties right now is 7%. But for the CCR, the core central region, is 11%. Can you imagine that you have 100 CCR properties, 11% of them are vacant, and that's only counting for those units that you don't have PUB bills. If I have utility bills, you don't count me as vacant at all, even though I have no tenant to stay there. So you remember the last financial crisis, global financial crisis in 2009, Q3, and the vacancy rate is only 6%. Now we're 7 to 11%. That is very high. So if I can't get the tenant, why am I subsidizing the tenant to stay there? That means the tenant's rent may not be able to cover my maintenance fee, my mortgage, my property tax. So if I keep subsidizing a tenant to stay there, what's the point? What's the point of keeping my properties right now, you see? So I might have as well sell it or don't buy
Yeah, but then it's going to be a challenge trying to find a willing buyer at the price that you want,
cannot
right?
open the floodgate for foreigners to come in. Even if the government open the floodgate, is there any high-end jobs, like good quality jobs for foreigners to come in? I don't think so. This is something that as a retail investor or individual landlord is not under our control with no say at all. So we can only look at what the government can do and what the macro economy is doing. So for things that are not under our control, we better not touch as an investor. It is very risky.
So to put that, to back up that point with some numbers, I'm just looking at the Ministry of Manpower release from last Friday. It is the whole year of last year, we had non-resident employment declined by 16% or 181,000. So 181,000 jobs for pass holders lost is actually quite big, and that actually should have shrunk the rental market quite a lot. But of course, many of these 181,500 are also people who live in dormitories, or some of them may be the people with S-Pass or WP who are traveling between Singapore and Malaysia. On the Singapore employment fund, that part is what I'm more concerned about. For the whole year, Singaporean resident employment grew by 9,000 jobs. In fact, it's the fourth quarter, we increased by 43,000. So these numbers are interesting to me. Local employment growth means more money into Singapore households' bank accounts, which should be good. But the breakdown of that 43,000 resident jobs, because I walk around buildings doing survey every other day, I'm wondering how many of these 43,000 jobs are the social distancing ambassadors and the people checking temperature and checking your mobile phone screens as you enter buildings. So without that breakdown, I don't know how many of these 43,000 jobs in the fourth quarter last year are long-term jobs, are jobs with careers, or they are merely just for the interim stopgap COVID special measures.
So I think all these, there's a lot of data out there, and I think sometimes one of the main challenges is trying to figure out what the mainstream media is saying and what it really means. It keeps saying everything is going up, everything is looking fine, but then when you talk to other people, it's not quite the case. What do you guys feel are the real sentiment out there in terms of whether or not people are comfortable with the property they're in, or whether they want to actually get a new property, or they're just very concerned and just don't want to get into that space at all?
I think the developers, they are stuck too, because the developers cannot tell people that they had difficulties clearing the unsold units in the new projects launched a long time ago. And the sales results of new launches are a far cry from what we have at the market peak in 2013, when you have 100% also out in one day. Today, if you launch a project, even though you have 12,000 visitors to the sales gallery during the period weekend, during the actual week of launch, if you have 20 to 30% of units sold, you are considered very good, excellent already. But if you look at the URA website, you'll find that there are at least like 15 new projects that have launched for over 1 year, over 12 months, but still have more than 40% unsold. So if there are so many unsold units, how can the media tell them that, tell the people that, hey, the market is really bad, don't buy, because they have to clear it. And we said in 2020 last year, we actually have planned 40 new projects to launch, right? But because of COVID-19, because of the lockdown, we only managed to launch 23 of them. So what's going to happen in the 17 of them? And there are more that plan to launch this year, 2021, right? So together with that, we have at least 25 new projects that are queuing to launch. With that, I don't think the media or developers or the stakeholders or the industry stakeholders going to tell people that, hey, don't buy, we still have a lot to clear. So they have to say the market is good until they clear everything. And the media depends on the advertising dollars from developers as well, right? So I guess as consumers, we don't have a choice but continue to see all these news articles saying that how good the market is. But actually, when they check the figures, this is a very different picture.
There's a question here. Thank you for the question. Please keep them coming in. The reef at King's Dock sells over 90% of 300 units offered over the launch weekend. Then the question is, although we are in a COVID-19 situation, there's unemployment, the vacancy rate of retail and office is trending up. Why do so many ignorant or passionate buyers still rush into this situation? Why are they still buying property?
My mathematics is not good. What's 90% of 300 units is exactly
270
how many units of the whole project. And that's the sort of headlines that we see in the media, right? 90% of 300 units. So during the real heydays when things were really, really hot, I was involved with a couple of Sentosa projects as well as Vina Ip projects, where developers' fees to property agents during launch went down to 0%. I also recall another one which was 0.2 or 0.3%. And some of these projects, we even had to ask the buyers, if you would like me to help you queue up overnight to secure you a slot to choose your unit, would you pay us a fee instead of for me to collect the fee from the seller? Today, a lot of new launches, the fees are between 2 to 4%. Some of the new launches that didn't sell so well and still have remaining units after 1.5 years, the fees may be up to 5%. And so that has pushed property agents to work really hard to earn these fees. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is with our wonderful world-class education, our investors are still probably too lazy to read a little bit more. So the project in this question, next to it, somewhere very nearby, there's another project that has been featured in the Age magazine's top loss-making resale transactions for quite many times. There are investors who are selling out nearby condominium units at between $500,000 to $1 million of losses. And so if investors realize that and they look at what are the dollar per square foot transactions just within the next 200 meters of this project, I think they might not have sold 90% of 300.
So there's a question also from that was sent in earlier. This is from a retiree. Bulk of the CPF was used to pay for a 99-year condo, 99-year lease condo. It's now 25 years and it's fully paid up. The condo is rented out and the CPF monthly payout will come later this year, but the amount is small due to the low retirement sum. Is it better to sell the condo even at break-even price? Hopefully she can get even that. Or should she hang on?
I think if you have fully paid up for your property, congratulations, because you're not under the pressure of no tenant or rental very low or competing with other newly TOP projects. So I don't see the point why you have to dump it in the market unless you can find a really very good price and so you can sell it at a very big profit. So I think fully paid up is very safe. Me buying when you buy a property now at this point of time, because of uncertainties, I had pay as much cash as possible to lower your risk because you don't know what will be happening in the future.
Yeah. But unless your family owns a hospital, for retirement, if you have got a property as an investment and you are retired, but health is always an uncertainty, the rising cost of healthcare is a certainty. And a property is actually not a passive investment, even if it is fully paid up. Every month there are expenses. Every year there is the tax man behind you. And then if the property gets older as you get older, its maintenance requirements go up, your own maintenance requirements go up too. So we have got to also consider what sort of lifestyle do you want to lead in your retirement. So maybe even selling at a small lot, but then having that cash in the bank account might make you sleep much better every day.
I agree with Swee Yong on that. The other thing as a lawyer that I always remind my clients is because it's a leasehold property, remember you only have a finite ownership of it. And as the lease gets lower and lower, remember your pool of buyers also gets lower and lower because there are restrictions in borrowing from banks when the leasehold interest falls below 60 years and the use of CPF. And like Swee Yong says, it may be better to take that money, cash out and use it for something else. Or what people do is they recirculate that investment cash and buy a new leasehold interest or maybe put it into freehold property. I also see that Julian has also had a critique on his theory about maybe the most inelastic supply of property of buy and sell would be freehold landed property. And that's not a wrong theory because we know that the government has restricted the supply of landed freehold property in Singapore, and now all property usually issued by the government is leasehold.
Thanks for answering that for Julian's critique of things.
There are a couple of questions about landed properties.
Actually, before we get into that, I just wanted to check on the 99-year lease discussion and what that means for HDB owners who might be getting long in tooth with their properties. What should the direction be for them? Because it's for sure going to hit them at some point down the line. Should they continue to stay in there? Should they look at moving out? What do you guys recommend?
I have a relatively long chapter about this subject in the book. If your HDB is approaching 40 years of age, I think you should quickly sell to someone who is very rich and who is able to afford that following depreciation that comes after it has crossed the 40-year mark. If you are in a HDB flat that is now 20-something years, maybe you can still sell it to somebody, and that buyer within the next 10 years might still be able to have the HDB flat hold its value, but subsequent to that, the value depreciation would then be relatively rapid as well. I have also written up a long proposal as to what we should do as a nation for amending this policy of HDB leasehold.
Well, we'll see how that shapes up because I think that's an ongoing struggle, right, between the government and the public and the authorities. So we'll just have to see how they decide in the end. Yeah, coming back to the questions on landed properties that you wanted to address, Swee Yong.
Yes. So in the past, it was the Singapore pathway, right? Other than the credit card, condo, car membership club thing, we were progressing along the line of getting a government grant to buy our flats, subsequently moving into a private condo, then subsequently moving into landed. That path has been taken on by baby boomers. That path has been taken on by the Generation X people. Do we really think that that path is a continuous train of a pipeline that would keep filling itself up? So think about what would Generation Y and Generation Z want? Because if you were to buy a landed property today, you consider it a good investment, but it is only a good investment and you can only make a profit if you were to sell it in 20 years' time. Would the Gen X and Gen Y people like landed properties? And this is why I've been studying demographics and employment very closely. I think that in fact the Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z people who are in the university course and young working adults now are probably less keen, not as much as my generation and my elders are, to own a landed property. And as the baby boomers start to pass away, then there will be even more landed properties that will be handed down. And if a patriarch were to hand down his semi-D after he passes away, the 3 children, unless one of them wants to inherit it for his own use, otherwise it is easier to always sell the landed property and split the cash. And so over the next 10 to 15 years, we might in fact see quite many resale landed properties being made available. And one recent very high profile case is our celebrity performers in the media. They decided to sell their parents' good class bungalow around King Albert Park area, right? So this inheritance thing will become more and more prevalent over the next 10 to 15 years. So I'm uncertain that landed is a definite winner.
Comment on that because I myself experience that right now, because in our landed housing estates, it's around 18 years now. So those people who buy firsthand, their kids have grown up. So the old couples, they are like starting their landed house now. And there are a lot of young families with 2-3 kids. Then they come and buy over the landed house. So I see that there is still people who have the demand, because there will always be young families that they want more space for their children. So that's why they come. And so I don't see there's a problem right now for the turnover of landed houses, at least in our housing estates, because it's closer to schools, because it's closer to parents and more space for the children. But I would see the problem, that the potential problem that might appear in maybe 20 years time, when people are aging, and then more and more of our neighbors need to sell their house, but are there enough young families with young kids that want to take over it? So I think it depends on whether the aging is faster or the coming up of young families is faster. So if our population, the shrinking population size is appearing, that would be potentially a problem over here. But I still see that the difference between why we choose to a landed rather than a 4-bedroom condo is that we don't have to pay the high maintenance fee if you stay in a condo, and we have the space that we need. So the overall running costs over the years, when we have young kids, we have a young family, is more worth it, I would say. But if you say, I want to do it as an investment, I want to perceive that there's a appreciation of value, nobody can tell, you see, because at the population growth, the patterns, the trends are not under our control. We can only guess what will happen and predict what will happen, but what will actually happen, it depends on the government policy, it depends on the culture of our next generation, whether they want to have family, whether they want to have kids.
When your roof starts to leak, you will start to appreciate that you are paying maintenance fees in a condo.
My condos, maybe because last time they are quite some years already, so I also have the leaking problem, so it's the same thing.
Because when you live in a landed house and your roof starts to leak, tracing the leak itself and finally then finding the cause of the leak and patching it is not only expensive, it is tedious. Yeah.
But it's also a function of the sinking fund, right? Houses, the condo sinking fund, and whether it's able to do a lot of the maintenance work that might come up with an aging structure.
Yeah, but at least the condo management is taking care of it. And if you don't buy the top floor in a condo, you are unlikely to have that problem.
But you're paying for that anyway.
Yeah.
So, all this said, and with so many changes taking place, do you think, what is the perspective of the Singapore property market? I think if you're stuck here, then this is a market that you have to look at with all the rules and regulations that are in place. If you are a foreigner, is the Singapore market still viewed favorably versus other markets, or would they be running off to Osaka and buying up your properties that you're marketing over there, Swee Yong?
I am more concerned on the macro side about whether this economy is competitive in the new tech-driven environment. Our inability after the last 20 years of massive investments into science, technology, engineering, biotech. Have we produced patents sufficiently? Have we produced good, usable intellectual property that do we have inventors who are now sitting on royalty payments and just shaking leg every year collecting royalties? I think we are still a little bit far from that. And therefore, just giving out tax incentives to attract MNCs here, the MNCs must want to have a reason to come here, which is why then I'm monitoring the employment market, which categories of jobs are being created. So post-COVID, a lot of these answers are not available. We really have to look at the next 2 years as well as look at what this group of 40 ministers are doing. In the meantime, the outlook so far is not great. Not great.
Jennifer, what do you think?
Going on from Swee Yong's point, I think Singapore has an advantage because we've managed to deal with the COVID virus quite well. And we're actually known to be a progressive city where it's good to live and work. Now, the money is not in Singapore. Investments are actually in the region in Southeast Asia. But if we're talking about MNCs, Swee Yong, that's what I think, is that a lot of MNCs see Singapore as a safe place to put their headquarters. And our EDB has been very, very, they've been doing a lot to try to attract MNCs to put headquarters here in Singapore. So especially now with work from home and people don't really travel the region, it may be attractive to park your expat and their families here in Singapore. And that would, of course, help the high-end condo market and things like that. And then going on to Swee Yong's Japanese investments, if you're asking whether Singapore real estate and residential real estate is attractive, I would actually say this is something that's been happening the last 10 years. As we brought in ABSD, Singaporeans decided that there was no point in buying in their own home market, and they started putting their monies overseas. Now, that's when some of them got burnt because they realized Singapore's legal market when it comes to real estate and ownership of property is very, very robust. It's very easy to buy and sell and basically not get cheated. Some other countries around the region may not have been so good and some people will have lost their monies. That said, I have clients who were very interested in Japan because Japan's residential and commercial real estate market, I think also the culture in Japan has made it a safe investment haven. Although Swee Yong, some of them tell me that Japan hasn't really got them the returns yet and they're still waiting. But of course, these are the people who didn't invest into Tokyo and Osaka. They were investing into places where they go for their ski, Hokkaido and things like that. And they said those didn't have no returns yet, save that they have a holiday home every winter.
Look, if you invested out of passion, you invested in art, you invested in a Ming vase, would you expect your Ming vase to pay you a dividend? No, right?
Yeah, but that is a Ming vase, you see. These are people who are Singaporeans, very commercially savvy, functional Singaporeans who, during the summer months, they would still expect that maybe they could rent out their property.
In Hakuba, when there's no snow, you are renting to...
But the beautiful spring flowers and summer flowers...
that's almost as bad as a Ming vase.
Practical about the investments.
Okay. Okay, so work from home was something that you raised, Jennifer, and I think it's also one of the questions asked. If WFH continues and many highly paid CBD professionals don't need to be near the CBD, would some demand shift to more livable developments? That means with sea view or areas with more space outside of the shopping districts.
In fact, this is the point that is also no answers now, but it's also something I'm concerned about. EDB has brought in many companies that made Singapore regional headquarters and global headquarters even, or for treasury management or for logistics, supply chain management, right? With work from home now, our supply chain specialists from Philippines, from Indonesia, from Malaysia, they can work in KL but they are fulfilling the roles of international manufacturer with their supply chain headquarters in Singapore. And therefore, the total number of expatriates employed by the Singapore HQ could still be high, but they are physically not here. And that's the power of, I mean, look at how smooth this meeting has gone. 2 years ago, this Zoom meeting might have 1 or 2 more quotes other than my upside down image. 2 years ago, it might not have been so smooth. And today we can actually carry out, I'm sure Jennifer has done contractual work through Zoom with her clients.
I think technology has enabled a lot of things. It's also made this session fly by. We are on the 1:30 mark, which is the end of the session. I'd like to thank Swee Yong, Vina, and Jennifer for their inputs and to the audience for a lot of questions. There are still many questions out there. We should do another session maybe down the line. I think the property will always be an ongoing issue that we need to discuss. But I think it's evident from the discussion that we don't have a lot of the answers just yet. I think we still need to let COVID play out and see what happens, see how the market shapes up, see how the dust settles, and eventually we might get a better bearing on things. But again, we've got the issue of what the retirees do, what happens with the baby boomers bailout, and what will the next generation want in terms of property. And when travel comes back and opportunities arise in other parts of the region or the world, will there be a lot of people in Singapore still wanting to be rooted here? Or would they be happy to do that in any part of the world? And as Swee Yong said, you can work from home. You don't need, home doesn't need to be in Singapore anymore, right? So a lot of ifs and buts and what could and what may happen. So we'll just have to wait out that whole change and see what happens. But thanks again to everybody for joining this lunch session and for adding a lot of thought and ideas into the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.